The coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but Ryan hadn't noticed. His eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets while his daughter's small voice drifted from the living room, talking to her stuffed animals. Again. It was Tuesday evening, or maybe Wednesday. The days had started blending together somewhere between the product launch and the investor meeting that never seemed to end. "Daddy, can we practice my letters?" Sophie appeared in the doorway of his home office holding a workbook that looked brand new. He couldn't remember buying it. "In a minute, sweetheart. Daddy just needs to finish this one thing." The words came out automatically, the same ones he'd been saying for weeks, maybe months. Sophie's shoulders dropped slightly, but she nodded and wandered back to her toys. Ryan told himself he'd make it up to her this weekend. Definitely this weekend. The notification on his phone made him jump. School registration deadline tomorrow. His stomach dropped. How had he let it get this close? Jennifer would have had this handled months ago. Jennifer had handled everything when it came to Sophie. But Jennifer was gone, and he was drowning in a life that felt 3 sizes too big for him. Ryan pulled up the school district website on his laptop, squinting at the tiny map that showed the boundary lines. The private academy everyone at the office recommended was there, somewhere in the north part of the district. Preston Hills Academy. That's where the CFO's kids went. That's where he was supposed to send Sophie. He zoomed in on the map trying to match street names, but his phone kept buzzing with work messages, breaking his concentration. There. Riverside something. That had to be it. He clicked through the enrollment forms, filling in information while responding to emails with his other hand. Sophie's birthday, check. Address, check. Emergency contact, he paused at that one. Who was her emergency contact now? He typed in his assistant's number and kept going. The form submitted with a cheerful ding, and he felt a small weight lift from his chest. One thing checked off the endless list. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. Ryan had been up until 2 dealing with a crisis in the Singapore office, and now he was racing across town with Sophie buckled in the back seat, eating a granola bar for breakfast. Not exactly Father of the Year material, but at least she was fed. "Are you excited about your new school?" he asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Sophie nodded, her dark curls bouncing. "Will there be other kids there?" "Of course, baby. Lots of kids." He tried to remember what the school website had said, but honestly, he'd barely looked at it. He'd been too busy making sure the tuition payment went through. The GPS led them down streets that seemed less familiar than he expected. The houses got smaller, more lived in. Chain-link fences replaced wooden privacy barriers. Ryan felt a small flutter of uncertainty but pushed it aside. Maybe this was just a different route. When they pulled into the parking lot, Ryan's first thought was that the GPS had made a mistake. This couldn't be Preston Hills Academy. The building was older, with faded yellow paint and a playground that had clearly seen better days. But there were parents dropping off children, and a banner hung over the entrance welcoming students to their first day. Riverside Elementary. It read in cheerful blue letters. Ryan's phone rang. The board chairman? He had to take it. "Just hold on, Sophie," he said, pressing the phone to his ear as he helped her out of the car. The conversation pulled him in immediately. Projected quarterly earnings, potential merger talks. Things that seemed desperately important in that moment. Sophie's hand was small in his as he walked her toward the building, still talking, barely seeing where they were going. The classroom was bright and colorful, with student artwork already covering one wall and a reading corner filled with cushions. A young woman stood at the door, greeting each child with a warm smile. She couldn't have been more than 26 or 27, wearing a simple blue dress and sneakers covered in cartoon characters. "Hi there, you must be Sophie," she said, kneeling down to Sophie's eye level. "I'm Miss Kate, and I'm so happy you're in my class." Sophie pressed closer to Ryan's leg, suddenly shy. Ryan nodded distractedly at the teacher, still half listening to the voice on his phone. "Yeah, great, thanks. She'll be fine." He bent down quickly to kiss Sophie's forehead. "Be good, sweetheart. I'll pick you up at 3. He was back in the car before he registered the worry in Sophie's eyes as she'd looked back at him from the classroom doorway. The day swallowed him whole. Meetings, calls, a working lunch that consisted of him eating a sandwich while presenting to potential investors. When his assistant reminded him at 2:30 that he needed to leave for school pickup, Ryan felt like he was surfacing from underwater. The parking lot was chaos. Minivans and older sedans jockeyed for position, and Ryan's sleek black car stood out like a sore thumb. He found himself waiting in a line of parents, all of whom seemed to know each other, chatting through open windows. He kept his windows up and checked his emails. Sophie emerged from the building holding Miss Kate's hand, and something about her body language made Ryan's chest tighten. She looked small, lost. When she climbed into the back seat, she was quiet. "How was your first day?" Ryan asked, pulling out of the parking lot perhaps a bit too quickly. "It was okay. Just okay. Did you make any friends?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment. "The other kids already know each other. You'll catch up. It just takes time." Ryan's phone buzzed with an urgent message. "Hey, I need to take this call, but we can talk when we get home, okay?" He didn't see the way Sophie's face fell, or how she turned to look out the window, blinking rapidly. Miss Kate watched them drive away from her classroom window. She'd taught for 4 years now, and she'd seen plenty of parents who were overwhelmed, distracted, or struggling. But something about the disconnect between the father and daughter bothered her. The little girl had Sophie's registration listed a completely different school, she'd noticed. And the father had barely made eye contact, hadn't asked a single question about the classroom or Sophie's day. The other children had been mostly kind to Sophie, but they could sense she was different. Her backpack probably cost more than some of their parents made in a week. She'd asked questions that made it clear she'd expected something else. When they'd gone outside for recess, Sophie had stood alone by the fence watching the other children play. Miss Kate made a note in her planner to call Sophie's father tomorrow. They needed to talk, whether he wanted to or not. Something wasn't right here, and that little girl deserved better. At home that evening, Ryan carried his laptop to the dining room table, telling himself he was spending time with Sophie even though his eyes stayed glued to the screen. Sophie pushed her chicken nuggets around her plate and didn't finish her milk. "Daddy, can you read me a story before bed?" "Absolutely, baby. Just let me finish sending these emails." But the emails led to a video call, which led to a document that needed review. And by the time Ryan made it to Sophie's room, she was already asleep, her nightlight casting shadows across her peaceful face. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, feeling something twist inside his chest. Tomorrow, he promised himself. Tomorrow he'd do better. The same promise he'd been making for 2 years, ever since the car accident that had taken Jennifer and left him alone with a 4-year-old and absolutely no idea how to be both parents at once. Work had become his escape, his excuse, his way of not facing the massive hole in their lives. Ryan pulled Sophie's blanket up to her chin and kissed her forehead. She stirred slightly, murmuring something he couldn't quite hear. He closed her door softly and went back to his laptop, pushing away the uncomfortable feeling that he was missing something important. He had no idea just how right that feeling was, or how much his life was about to change because of one careless mistake on a school registration form. The first week passed in a blur for Ryan, each day looking exactly like the one before. Drop Sophie off while on a conference call, work until his eyes hurt, pick her up in the carpool lane while answering emails on his phone. He'd ask how her day was, she'd say fine, and that was the extent of their communication about school. Miss Kate had called twice. Both times Ryan's assistant Denise had intercepted the calls, taking messages that Ryan glanced at and promptly forgot. "Teacher wants to discuss Sophie's adjustment." It seemed like standard new student stuff. Sophie wasn't complaining, so everything must be fine. That's what he told himself anyway. On Thursday afternoon, Sophie came home quieter than usual. She went straight to her room without even asking for a snack. Ryan noticed, but a supplier crisis in Taiwan demanded his immediate attention, and by the time he finished handling it, Sophie was already in bed. He'd check on her tomorrow. Definitely tomorrow. Friday morning brought an email that Ryan couldn't ignore, mostly because Denise flagged it as urgent and physically brought her laptop to his office to make him read it. "Ryan, I think you need to look at this one yourself," she said, her voice carrying a tone he rarely heard from her. The subject line read, "Mandatory Parent-Teacher Conference, Sophie Chen." The email from Miss Kate was polite but firm. Sophie was struggling socially and emotionally, and they needed to discuss her adjustment immediately. A conference time was already scheduled for Monday at 4 o'clock. Please confirm attendance. Ryan felt a flash of irritation. Struggling. Sophie had seemed fine. A little quiet, maybe, but she was always quiet. This teacher was probably just overreacting, one of those helicopter types who saw problems where none existed. But the word mandatory left little room for argument. "Confirm it," he told Denise with a sigh. "But see if she can do 4:15. I have a meeting that runs until 4. Monday afternoon, Ryan left his meeting at 4:12, congratulating himself on being only slightly late. He'd scheduled 15 minutes for this conference, which seemed generous. A quick chat about Sophie adjusting normally, maybe sign some papers, and he'd be back at his desk by 4:30. The classroom was empty except for Miss Kate, who sat at a small table clearly meant for children. She gestured to the tiny chair across from her. Ryan folded his tall frame into it awkwardly, immediately feeling off balance. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Chen," Miss Kate said, and there was something in her voice that made Ryan's defensive walls go up immediately. "Of course. Look, I know Sophie's the new kid, but she's resilient. She'll make friends soon enough." He glanced at his watch, a subtle hint that his time was valuable. Miss Kate didn't miss the gesture. Her jaw tightened slightly. "Mr. Chen, when was the last time you actually talked to Sophie about her day? Not just asked how it was, but really listened to her answer?" The question caught Ryan off guard. "I talk to my daughter every day." "Do you?" Miss Kate pulled out a folder. "Because Sophie tells me she eats dinner alone most nights, that you work in your office until she's asleep, that when you pick her up, you're always on the phone." Ryan felt his face flush. "I'm running a company. I have 300 employees depending on me. I'm doing the best I can as a single parent." "I understand that," Miss Kate said, and her voice softened slightly. "I really do. But your daughter is hurting, and you're not seeing it because you're not looking." "That's out of line," Ryan said, standing up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You don't know anything about our situation." Miss Kate stood too, meeting his eyes directly. She wasn't backing down. "I know that Sophie sits alone at lunch every single day. I know she drew this during art time." She pulled out a piece of paper. Ryan took it reluctantly. The drawing showed a little girl with dark curls sitting at a table. Across from her was a laptop. Just a laptop. No person. Above the laptop, Sophie had drawn a speech bubble that said, "Just a minute, sweetheart." The air went out of Ryan's lungs. "I know," Miss Kate continued, her voice gentler now, "that when the other kids talk about what they did with their parents over the weekend, Sophie says her daddy had to work. Every single weekend. I know she's started saying she doesn't feel good, so she can sit in my classroom during recess instead of facing the playground alone." Ryan sank back into the ridiculous tiny chair, still staring at the drawing. His throat felt tight. "Mr. Chen, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to help Sophie, and I think you need to know something else." Miss Kate pulled out another paper, this one an official-looking form. Sophie's registration lists Preston Hills Academy as her intended school. This address doesn't match Riverside Elementary's district at all. Ryan looked up sharply. "What? You enrolled her in the wrong school. I'm guessing you didn't realize it." The room seemed to tilt. Ryan grabbed the form, scanning it with growing horror. The address was wrong. He'd clicked on the wrong school on that stupid map. He'd been so distracted, so tired, so completely overwhelmed that he'd sent his daughter to the wrong school and hadn't even noticed for a week and a half. "I don't." Ryan's voice came out rough. "I didn't know. I thought." "I figured as much," Miss Kate said, sitting back down. "Look, I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse. I'm telling you because your daughter needs you to wake up. She's 6 years old. She lost her mother, and now she's losing you too, just in a different way." The words hit like a physical blow. Ryan wanted to argue, to defend himself, to explain all the reasons why he had to work this hard. But sitting in that tiny chair, holding his daughter's heartbreaking drawing, all the excuses died in his throat. "What do I do?" The question came out barely above a whisper. Miss Kate's expression softened completely. "First, you decide if you want to transfer Sophie to Preston Hills or keep her here. But really decide. Don't just do what you think you're supposed to do. Then you show up. Actually show up. Not just physically, but mentally. Put the phone down. Listen when she talks. Be her dad, not just the person who pays the bills. Ryan nodded slowly, unable to speak. We have a fall festival coming up in 2 weeks. Miss Kate continued. We need parent volunteers. The Reading Buddy program meets twice a week in the morning. There's a family fun night next month. These are ways you can be involved if you want to be. I want to be, Ryan said, and he was surprised to find he meant it. I do. I just don't know how to do this without her. He didn't have to say Jennifer's name. Miss Kate's eyes grew sympathetic. I can't imagine how hard that is. But Sophie needs you to figure it out. Because right now she's getting lost, and you're the only one who can find her. Ryan left the school 20 minutes later, the meeting running twice as long as he'd planned. He sat in his car in the parking lot for a long moment, staring at Sophie's drawing. How had he missed this? How had he been so blind? His phone buzzed. 3 missed calls, 7 new emails, all marked urgent. He looked at the screen for a long moment, then did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He turned it off. Completely off. At home, Sophie was already there with the nanny. Ryan paid the woman for the week and told her he wouldn't need her tomorrow. The surprise on her face might have been funny under different circumstances. Sophie, he called out. Can you come here, baby? Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, cautious. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart. Not at all. I'm in trouble, though. Big trouble. Ryan sat down on the bottom step. Can you sit with me for a minute? Sophie descended slowly and sat beside him, a careful few inches between them. I talked to Miss Kate today, Ryan began. And she showed me your drawing, the one with the laptop. Sophie's face flushed. I didn't mean to make you sad. You didn't make me sad. I made myself sad. And I made you sad too, didn't I? Ryan's voice cracked slightly. Sophie, I've been a really lousy dad lately. I've been here, but I haven't really been here. Do you know what I mean? Sophie nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought if I just kept working, kept busy, I wouldn't miss Mommy so much. But I forgot that you miss her too, and you needed me, and I wasn't paying attention. Ryan pulled her close and Sophie dissolved into sobs against his chest. They sat there on the stairs for a long time, both of them crying, both of them finally letting out grief they'd been holding in for too long. When Sophie finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her nose was running, but she looked lighter somehow. Daddy, can we have dinner together tonight without your computer? Absolutely. How about we order pizza and watch a movie? Your choice. Sophie's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Really? Really. And Sophie? There's something else I need to tell you. I made a mistake with your school. I sent you to the wrong one by accident. So if you want, we can switch you to the fancy school I meant to choose. But I want you to decide. Do you like Riverside? Do you want to stay? Sophie considered this seriously. Miss Kate is really nice, and there's a girl named Amy who shared her crayons with me today. Can I think about it? You can take all the time you need, Ryan said, standing up and offering his hand. Now let's go order that pizza. And tomorrow you're going to tell me everything about your day. Everything. And I'm going to actually listen. As they walked to the kitchen together, Ryan felt something shift inside his chest. The grief was still there. The overwhelming responsibility was still there. But for the first time in 2 years, he felt like maybe he could handle it. Not by running away into work, but by running toward the person who needed him most, his daughter. The little girl with dark curls and his late wife's smile, who'd been trying to get his attention in the only way she knew how. By disappearing, just like he had. Not anymore, Ryan promised himself. Never again. Ryan didn't sleep much that night. He kept thinking about Sophie's drawing, about the empty space where he should have been. At 2 a.m, he found himself standing in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep like he used to when she was a baby, back when Jennifer was alive and they'd take turns checking on her, marveling that they'd created this perfect little person. When had he stopped doing that? When had work become more important than these quiet moments? The next morning, Ryan did something he hadn't done in months. He made pancakes. They were slightly burned and oddly shaped, but when Sophie came downstairs and saw him standing at the stove instead of hunched over his laptop, her whole face lit up. "You're cooking?" she asked, climbing onto a kitchen stool. "Trying to, anyway. They might taste like hockey pucks, but they're made with love." Ryan slid a plate in front of her and Sophie giggled at the lopsided circles. "They look like clouds," she said diplomatically, drowning them in syrup. Ryan sat down across from her with his own plate, no laptop in sight. "So tell me about this Amy girl who shared crayons with you." Sophie's eyes widened, surprised he remembered. "She sits next to me. She has a cat named Mr. Whiskers, and she brought pictures to show everyone. Can we get a cat, Daddy?" "Maybe. Tell me more about school first." "What's your favorite part?" And Sophie did. She talked about the reading corner with the beanbag chairs, about how Miss Kate did funny voices during story time, about the boy named Tyler who could burp the alphabet and made everyone laugh. Ryan listened, really listened, and realized how much he'd been missing. His daughter had a whole world he knew nothing about. After breakfast, Ryan made another unprecedented move. He called his second-in-command, Ben, and told him he'd be coming in late. "Is everything okay?" Ben asked, concern evident in his voice. Ryan was never late. "Yeah, actually, I'm taking Sophie to school today. The right way." When they pulled into the Riverside Elementary parking lot, Ryan turned off the car but didn't immediately get out. "Sophie, I want you to know something. I talked to Miss Kate about switching schools, but I meant what I said. This is your choice. If you want to stay here, we stay. If you want to try the other school, we'll do that." Sophie looked down at her hands. "The other school is fancier, right? Like where rich kids go?" "It's different, yeah. Smaller classes, more activities, that kind of thing. Would you like me more if I went there?" Ryan's heart cracked. "Oh, baby, no. I love you exactly the same no matter where you go to school. I love you more than anything in the world." "I'm sorry I haven't been showing you that." Sophie thought for a moment. "I want to stay here. Miss Kate is nice, and Amy said we could be best friends if I wanted." "Then here is where you'll stay," Ryan said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Now how about I walk you all the way to your classroom today?" Miss Kate was setting up for the morning when they arrived, writing the day's schedule on the whiteboard. She turned when she heard them come in, surprise crossing her face when she saw Ryan. "Mr. Chen." "Sophie. Good morning." "Good morning, Miss Kate," Sophie said shyly, then hurried to put her backpack in her cubby. Ryan approached the teacher feeling oddly nervous. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday. You were right about everything. And I wanted to tell you that Sophie wants to stay at Riverside. So we're staying." Miss Kate studied him for a moment as if trying to determine if he was serious. "That's good to hear. She's a sweet kid. She just needs some consistency." "I know, which is why I'm here to ask about that volunteer list you mentioned." "The fall festival? You want to volunteer?" Miss Kate couldn't hide her skepticism. "I do, I need to. Put me down for whatever you need help with." Ryan pulled out his phone, then paused. "Actually, can I give you my direct number? Not my assistant's. If Sophie needs anything or if there's anything I should know, I want you to call me. Personally." Something in Miss Kate's expression softened. She handed him a sign-up sheet, and Ryan wrote his name next to book fair setup and game booth coordinator. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan's life underwent a quiet revolution. He left work at 5:30 every day, no exceptions. He had dinner with Sophie, helped her with homework, read her bedtime stories. His team at the office was baffled, but the company didn't collapse. In fact, being forced to delegate made his managers step up in ways they hadn't before. The morning of the fall festival, Ryan arrived at school at 7, with Sophie bouncing excitedly beside him. The parking lot was already filling with parents carrying boxes and supplies. Ryan felt out of place in his jeans and old college sweatshirt, so different from his usual suits. "You made it," Miss Kate said, appearing beside him with a clipboard and a coffee that looked desperately needed. "I wasn't entirely sure you'd show. I said I would. People say a lot of things." She handed him a stack of folding tables. "These go by the basketball court. Think you can handle it, Mr. CEO?" There was a teasing edge to her voice that made Ryan smile. "I think I can manage." He hefted the tables and started walking, surprised when Miss Kate fell into step beside him. "You know, I owe you an apology too," she said. "I judged you pretty harshly at that conference. I didn't know your whole situation. You didn't need to know it. You were advocating for Sophie. That's your job, and you were right." They worked side by side for the next hour, setting up booths and hanging decorations. Other parents drifted over, introducing themselves, pulling Ryan into conversations about school fundraisers and Teacher Appreciation Week. He met Amy's mom, who thanked him for the playdate invitation Sophie had mentioned. Ryan had no memory of agreeing to a playdate, but he nodded and made a mental note to actually follow through. Miss Kate was everywhere, coordinating volunteers, solving problems, somehow knowing exactly where everything needed to go. Ryan found himself watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was something magnetic about her energy, the way she lit up when talking to the kids, how she made everyone around her feel valued and seen. "She's something special, isn't she?" Amy's mom, Linda, said, following his gaze. Ryan felt his face heat. "She's very organized," Linda laughed. "Sure, organized. That's definitely what you were thinking." She patted his arm. "She's single, by the way. In case you were wondering." "I wasn't," Ryan said quickly, but Linda just smiled knowingly and walked away. The festival itself was chaos in the best way. Sophie dragged Ryan from booth to booth, her hand firmly in his. She won a goldfish at the ring toss, got her face painted like a butterfly, and ate so much cotton candy that Ryan knew he'd regret it at bedtime. But watching her laugh, seeing her run and play with Amy and the other kids, was worth any amount of sugar-induced hyperactivity. At the book fair booth, Ryan found himself working alongside Miss Kate during the afternoon shift. They fell into an easy rhythm, helping kids pick out books, making change, recommending titles. "You're good at this," Miss Kate commented during a quiet moment. "Selling books, connecting with the kids. You're more natural at it than you think." Ryan watched Sophie through the crowd, showing her new books to a group of friends. "I almost missed all of this. If you hadn't said something, if you hadn't made me see what I was doing, I would have just kept going, keeping myself so busy I didn't have to feel anything." Miss Kate's voice was gentle. "Grief is hard. There's no right way to handle it. How did you know? About my wife?" Sophie mentioned her once. "She said her mom was in heaven and couldn't come to school events anymore." Miss Kate looked down at her hands. "My dad died when I was 8. I remember what it felt like. That empty chair at every school play, every parent-teacher night. I didn't want that for Sophie if there was something I could do about it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the festival bustle around them. Ryan felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the tight knot that had lived there for 2 years. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for caring enough to push, for not just letting it go." "That's the job," Miss Kate said, but she was smiling. As the festival wound down and the sun started to set, parents began packing up booths and collecting tired children. Sophie found Ryan helping collapse tables, her face paint smeared and her new goldfish bowl clutched carefully in both hands. "Daddy, can Miss Kate come over for dinner sometime? To see where Mr. Bubbles lives?" She held up the goldfish bowl proudly. Ryan felt his face flush again, but Miss Kate just laughed. "That's very sweet, Sophie. We'll see." "Is that a teacher way of saying no?" Sophie asked with the brutal honesty of 6-year-olds. "That's a teacher way of saying your dad has to invite me first," Miss Kate said, her eyes meeting Ryan's with an amused challenge. Ryan found himself speaking before he could overthink it. "Would you want to? Come for dinner, I mean. Nothing fancy, just pizza probably, because I'm a terrible cook. But Sophie's right. You should meet Mr. Bubbles. He's already the most important member of our family." Miss Kate's smile was warm and genuine. "I'd like that, as long as you promise not to talk about quarterly earnings or investor meetings." "Deal. Though I might need you to explain how Sophie's math homework works. That stuff is completely different from when I was a kid." They exchanged phone numbers, and as Miss Kate walked away to help other families, Linda appeared again at Ryan's elbow. "Not wondering, huh?" she said with a grin. Ryan just shook his head, unable to stop smiling. Sophie grabbed his hand, chattering about the festival, about Mr. Bubbles, about how this was the best day ever, and Ryan realized something that should have been obvious all along. The wrong turn hadn't been a mistake. It had been exactly what both of them needed. This school, these people, Miss Kate who'd cared enough to tell him hard truths, it had all led him back to what mattered most. He looked down at Sophie, her face tilted up toward his, still talking a mile a minute, and he was fully present for every word. The CEO, who'd been too busy to notice his daughter disappearing, was gone. In his place was just a dad holding his daughter's hand, carrying a goldfish in a plastic bowl, and feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something more. The dinner invitation hung in the air for 3 days before Ryan actually followed through. He must have typed and deleted a dozen text messages to Miss Kate before Sophie finally grabbed his phone. "Just ask her." "Daddy, you're being weird." "I'm not being weird," Ryan protested, but he was. He hadn't asked anyone to dinner since Jennifer. This felt different, bigger somehow, even though it was just pizza with his daughter's teacher. Finally, he sent a simple message. "Sophie wants to know if you're free Friday night for that pizza. She's very concerned about Mr. Bubbles' social development." The response came quickly. "Tell Sophie I wouldn't want Mr. Bubbles to become antisocial." 6 o'clock work? Ryan's heart did something stupid in his chest, and Sophie squealed when he told her, already planning what she'd show Miss Kate. Friday arrived with Sophie practically vibrating with excitement. She changed her outfit 3 times and insisted on making a welcome sign for the door. Ryan cleaned the house properly for the first time in weeks, suddenly seeing it through a visitor's eyes. Work papers everywhere, dishes in the sink, Sophie's toys scattered like landmines. When had he stopped noticing the mess? At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sophie sprinted to answer it with Ryan close behind. Miss Kate stood on the porch in jeans and a soft green sweater, holding a small bag. She looked different outside of school, younger somehow, her hair down instead of pulled back. "Hi, Sophie." "Hi, Mr. Chen," she said, smiling. "Please, it's Ryan. Mr. Chen makes me feel like you're about to give me detention." Miss Kate laughed. "Fair enough. And I'm Kate. Miss Kate is for school hours." Sophie grabbed Kate's hand and pulled her inside, immediately launching into a tour. "This is the living room. That's the kitchen. And Mr. Bubbles lives over here by the window because Daddy says he needs natural light." Ryan followed them, watching Kate admire the goldfish with appropriate seriousness. She'd brought a small castle decoration for the bowl, which made Sophie beam with delight. "Now he has a home," Sophie declared, carefully placing it in the water. The pizza arrived, and they settled around the dining room table. It felt strange at first having someone else there, filling the space that had been empty for so long, but Kate had an easy way about her, asking Sophie about her favorite books, complimenting her drawings on the refrigerator, making it feel natural. "So how did you end up teaching at Riverside?" Ryan asked, passing the garlic bread. Kate's expression grew thoughtful. "I grew up 3 blocks from that school. My mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and those teachers were the ones who made me believe I could be more than my circumstances. They saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself." She took a sip of water. "I wanted to be that person for other kids, the one who sees them. Like you saw Sophie," Ryan said quietly. "Like I saw both of you, actually. Sometimes parents need someone to see them too." After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Kate her room, her books, her stuffed animal collection. Ryan cleaned up the kitchen, listening to their voices drift down the stairs, Sophie's excited chatter and Kate's warm responses. This was what their house had been missing. Not just another adult, but life, energy, joy. When Sophie finally wound down, Kate helped tuck her into bed, reading one more story even though it was past bedtime. Ryan stood in the doorway watching them and felt his throat tighten. This scene, this simple moment of normalcy, was something he hadn't let himself want because wanting it hurt too much. Downstairs, Kate accepted his offer of coffee, and they settled on the couch with careful space between them. "She's doing so much better," Kate said. "At school, I mean. She's making friends, participating in class. Whatever you're doing, it's working. I'm just trying to be present. Turns out that's what she needed all along." Ryan stared into his coffee. "I was so angry after Jennifer died. Angry at the drunk driver, angry at the universe, angry at her for leaving us. I threw myself into work because I didn't know how else to handle it, but I was leaving Sophie too, just in a different way." Kate's hand found his, a gentle touch. "Grief isn't linear. You were surviving the only way you knew how. That doesn't excuse what I did, what I almost kept doing. No, but it explains it, and you changed. That's what matters. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Kate told him about her students, about the girl who'd overcome dyslexia to become the best reader in class, about the boy whose dad was deployed overseas, and how the whole class sent him videos. Ryan found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone, about the guilt of still being alive, about finding Sophie asleep in Jennifer's closet one night, wrapped in her mother's bathrobe. "Does it get easier?" he asked. "The missing her part?" "I think you just get better at carrying it," Kate said softly. "The weight doesn't change, but you get stronger." When Kate finally left around 11, Ryan stood on the porch watching her car pull away, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Not just attraction, though, that was there too. But possibility, the sense that maybe his life wasn't over, that maybe there was still room for new chapters. The next week passed in a comfortable rhythm. Ryan had coffee with Kate after school one afternoon, just talking while Sophie played on the playground. They discovered they both loved terrible action movies and argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It was easy, natural, like they'd known each other longer than a few weeks. Then Thursday happened. Ryan was in the middle of a presentation when his phone rang.
Kate's name on the screen.
She wouldn't call during school unless something was wrong. He excused himself and stepped out. "Kate? What's wrong?" Sophie fell on the playground. "She's okay, but she hit her head pretty hard. The school nurse wants her checked out, and I thought you'd want to know immediately." Kate's voice was calm but concerned. "I'm on my way. Stay with her, please." Ryan left the office so fast he forgot his jacket. The drive to school felt endless. His mind kept conjuring worst-case scenarios, the same ones that had haunted him since Jennifer's accident. Head injuries, hospitals, loss. When he burst into the nurse's office, Sophie was sitting on the examination table with an ice pack pressed to her forehead. Kate sat beside her, holding her hand. Sophie's face crumpled when she saw Ryan. "Daddy," she whimpered, and Ryan was across the room in 2 strides, gathering her carefully into his arms. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're okay." The nurse explained it was a minor bump, no signs of concussion, but recommended they see their doctor to be safe. Ryan nodded, barely processing the words, just holding Sophie close. Kate drove them to the urgent care clinic, staying even when Ryan told her she didn't have to. She sat in the waiting room while they took Sophie back, and she was still there 2 hours later when they emerged with a clean bill of health and a sucker. "You didn't have to wait," Ryan said, but he was grateful she had. "I wanted to make sure she was okay, that you were both okay." In the parking lot, Sophie already drowsy from the ordeal, Kate walked them to their car. "Thank you," Ryan said, "for calling me right away, for staying with her, for being here. You didn't have to do any of that." "Yes, I did," Kate said simply. "I care about her. About both of you." The words hung between them, meaning more than they said. Ryan wanted to kiss her right there in the parking lot, but Sophie was watching through sleepy eyes, and it didn't feel like the right moment. "Kate, he started, but she smiled and shook her head. "Get her home, rest, we can talk later." That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ryan sat in his living room staring at his phone. He wanted to call Kate, to say all the things he hadn't said in the parking lot. That he was falling for her, that she'd changed his life, that he was terrified because the last person he'd loved had been taken from him, and he didn't know if he could survive that kind of loss again. Instead, he sent a simple text. "Thank you for today. You were exactly what we needed." Her response came quickly. "You're welcome. Get some sleep, Ryan." But sleep didn't come easily. Ryan lay awake thinking about Sophie's head hitting the playground, about how quickly everything could change, about the precarious nature of happiness. He'd been so focused on rebuilding his relationship with Sophie that he hadn't let himself think too hard about what was developing with Kate. But today had made it clear. She wasn't just Sophie's teacher anymore. She'd become someone essential, someone he counted on, someone who'd woven herself into their lives so completely that he couldn't imagine them without her, and that scared him more than anything. The next morning, Sophie insisted on going to school despite Ryan's protests. At drop-off, Kate met them at the classroom door, checking Sophie's forehead where a small bruise had bloomed overnight. "Battle scar," Sophie announced proudly. "Very brave," Kate agreed, then looked at Ryan. "Can we talk for a minute?" Ryan's stomach dropped, but he nodded. They stepped into the hallway while Sophie went to show Amy her bruise. I've been thinking, Kate started, and Ryan braced himself for the worst. About us. About what's happening here. Kate, if you're worried about crossing professional boundaries, I understand. I don't want to make things difficult for you. That's not what I'm saying. She took a breath. I like you, Ryan. More than I probably should, more than I planned to. But I need to know if this is real for you, or if I'm just convenient. The teacher who's already in Sophie's life, Ryan stepped closer. You're not convenient. You're the first person in 2 years who made me want to try again, who made me believe I could be more than just surviving. When Sophie got hurt yesterday, you were the person I needed there, not just for her, but for me. Kate's eyes searched his face. I don't want to be a replacement for your wife. You're not. You couldn't be. You're completely yourself, and that's who I'm falling for. Ryan said the words before he could stop them, and Kate's breath caught. Falling for? Yeah, Ryan admitted. Terrifying, isn't it? Kate smiled, reaching for his hand. Completely terrifying. And maybe a little bit wonderful. They stood there in the school hallway, hands linked, both taking a leap neither had planned on. It was messy and complicated and probably too fast, but it was real. And real, Ryan was learning, was worth the risk. 3 months into their relationship, Ryan's world felt completely different. Sophie was thriving at school. He'd learned to leave work at a reasonable hour most days, and Kate had become a fixture in their lives. Sunday morning pancakes, homework help at the kitchen table, movie nights with Sophie between them on the couch. It felt like family, and that's what scared Ryan most, because families could be taken away. The real test came on a Tuesday afternoon when Ryan's phone lit up with a call from his late wife's parents. He hadn't spoken to Richard and Patricia in weeks, their relationship strained since he'd stopped attending their monthly memorial dinners. He'd claimed work conflicts, but really, he just couldn't sit through another evening of frozen grief, everyone pretending Jennifer might walk through the door any moment. Ryan, we need to talk. Richard's voice was formal, controlled. We're coming by this evening. 6 o'clock, it wasn't a request. They arrived exactly on time as always. Patricia swept in wearing pearls and criticism, her eyes immediately cataloging everything that had changed. The photos Ryan had finally taken down from the mantel. The new throw pillows Kate had helped Sophie pick out. The evidence of life moving forward. Where's Sophie? Patricia asked, her tone suggesting she already disapproved of the answer. Upstairs doing homework. I'll get her in a minute. Ryan gestured to the living room. Can I get you anything to drink? This isn't a social call, Richard said, settling onto the couch like he was preparing for a business negotiation. We've heard some concerning things about Sophie's schooling situation. Ryan's spine stiffened. What concerns? Patricia pulled out her phone, showing him a photo someone had clearly sent her. Kate and Ryan at the fall festival, standing close, both laughing. Sophie between them holding cotton candy. They looked like a family, and Ryan could see that's exactly what bothered his in-laws. We heard you enrolled Sophie in some public school by accident, Patricia said, and instead of correcting the mistake, you're keeping her there. Why would you do that when she could attend Preston Hills? When she deserves the best? She's happy at Riverside. She has friends, a teacher who cares about her. A teacher you're dating, Richard interjected. Don't think we don't know. Is that why you're really keeping her there? For your convenience? The accusation stung because Ryan had asked himself the same question a dozen times. I'm keeping her there because Sophie chose to stay. Because it's good for her. And this woman? Patricia's voice dripped disapproval. This teacher? What are your intentions there? It's only been 2 years, Ryan. 2 years since our daughter died and you're already replacing her? Nobody could replace Jennifer, Ryan said, fighting to keep his voice level. Kate isn't trying to. She's just someone who came into our lives when we needed her. Our granddaughter needs stability, not her father parading new women through her life. One woman, who Sophie adores, who has helped her come out of her shell, who stayed at urgent care for 2 hours when Sophie got hurt because she cared, not because she had to. Patricia's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained sharp. Jennifer would want better for Sophie. A proper education, not some underfunded public school, a stable home, not her father distracted by some young teacher. That's when Sophie appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her face pale. Grandma, Miss Kate isn't a distraction. She's nice to us. The room went silent. Ryan moved to Sophie's side, putting a protective hand on her shoulder. Patricia composed herself quickly. Sophie, darling, we just want what's best for you. Your mother would want you to have every advantage. Mommy would want Daddy to be happy. Sophie said, her voice small but certain. She told me that. Before the accident. She said if anything ever happened to her, Daddy shouldn't be sad forever. Ryan's throat constricted. He'd never heard this before. She did? He managed to ask. Sophie nodded. She said we'd have to help each other be happy again. And I think Miss Kate makes us happy. She makes you smile the way you used to. Patricia stood abruptly. We can see this is pointless. Richard, we should go. But Richard remained seated looking at Sophie with an expression that was hard to read. Sophie, do you like your school? Yes, Grandpa. And your teacher? Miss Kate? She's the best teacher ever. She doesn't get mad when I miss Mommy during class. She just lets me sit in the reading corner until I feel better. Something in Richard's face cracked. Your grandmother and I miss your mother very much. Sometimes when we miss her, we say things that aren't fair. Richard, Patricia said warningly, but he shook his head. No, Patricia. Look at her. Really look at her. He turned back to Sophie. You seem happy, sweetheart. Happier than the last time we saw you. Sophie nodded. I am happy. I miss Mommy every day, but I'm still happy. Is that okay? It's more than okay, Richard said, his voice rough. It's exactly what she would want. Patricia was crying now, quietly, her composure finally breaking. Ryan recognized the grief in her tears because he'd lived it. They weren't angry at him. They were drowning in the loss of their daughter and terrified of losing Jennifer's memory to the forward march of time. We're not forgetting her, Ryan said gently. We'll never forget her. But Sophie's right. Jennifer would want us to live, not just exist. She'd want Sophie to have a childhood full of friends and experiences, not just expensive schools. She'd want me to find happiness again, even if it scares me to death. Patricia sank back onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. Richard put an arm around her, his own eyes wet. We're sorry, he said finally. We thought if we could control these things, the schools and the traditions and the memorial dinners, we could hold on to her somehow. But we've been holding so tight we've been pushing away what matters most. He looked at Sophie. You. Your happiness. Sophie crossed the room and climbed onto the couch between her grandparents, small arms wrapping around Patricia's neck. You can still come to my school stuff. Miss Kate wouldn't mind. And you don't have to be sad at the dinners. We can tell happy stories about Mommy instead. Ryan watched his daughter, 6 years old and somehow wiser than all of them, healing wounds with the simple honesty only children possess. The evening ended differently than it started, with Richard and Patricia staying for dinner, looking at Sophie's schoolwork, hearing about her friends. They didn't mention Kate again, but Ryan could see them processing, adjusting, trying to let go of their rigid grip on the past. After they left, Sophie was quiet as Ryan tucked her into bed. Daddy, did I really remember what Mommy said, right? About being happy? Ryan stroked her hair. I think you remembered perfectly. Your mom was always the smart one. Do you think she'd like Miss Kate? The question punched Ryan in the chest, but he considered it seriously. Jennifer had been kind, generous, someone who valued substance over status. She'd laughed easily and loved fiercely. She would have seen exactly what he saw in Kate. Yeah, baby. I think she would have loved her. Sophie smiled sleepily. Good, because I want Miss Kate to come to the winter concert. And maybe Christmas. Is that okay? We'll ask her. But Sophie, you know this doesn't mean I loved Mommy any less, right? I know, Daddy. People have lots of love. It doesn't run out. She yawned, eyes drifting closed. That's what Miss Kate says. Love multiplies, it doesn't divide. Later that night, Ryan called Kate and told her everything. The confrontation, Sophie's wisdom, the strange peace that had settled over the evening. Your in-laws sound like they're grieving hard, Kate said. Maybe they just needed to see that moving forward doesn't mean moving on from her. When did you get so wise? Teacher training, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Also, I've been wanting to talk to you about something. Ryan's heart rate picked up. Okay. Sophie asked me to the winter concert, and I want to come, but I want to make sure you're really ready for that. For me to be part of these family things. Kate, I'm terrified, Ryan admitted. Terrified something will happen to you. Terrified of screwing this up. Terrified Sophie will get hurt if things don't work out. But I'm more terrified of missing this, of missing you, because I'm too scared to try. So we're both terrified? Completely. Good, Kate said. Because if you weren't scared, I'd wonder if you were taking this seriously. 6 months later, Ryan stood backstage at the winter concert, adjusting Sophie's costume for the 100th time. She was playing a snowflake in the winter pageant, one of 20 tiny snowflakes. But she was the most important snowflake in the world to him. In the audience, he could see Kate sitting between Richard and Patricia, an unlikely trio that had somehow formed over shared Sunday dinners and gradual healing. Ben from the office was there too, along with Linda and Amy from school. A whole community that had formed around them, built on the foundation of that one accidental enrollment.